All right, we are live. What's going on? I got. Let me bring Paul in here and see what's shaking. Today is August 18th. Let me see if I can loop you in here, Paul. Cool. I think we got Abai coming on as well in
Hi,
a hot
Nick.
second. What's up, man?
Doing good. Back in France.
You're back in France. Yeah, you had a big vacation. We got to hang out for a little bit. That was super cool.
Yeah, it was really nice to see you in the USA, and
Yeah,
yeah, we
and
enjoy.
you've had some pretty exciting news with recently. Let's see. I saw that. Let me see if I can switch the screen. But we saw that you've done the open LNS thing so that anyone can join the what is it, the Helium IoT thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's open. Yeah, I was waiting for being back in France and have time to support user in case it's needed. And yeah, so I just opened it on 16 as planned. So now it's I mean, we have more and more user jumping in, so that's good.
Yeah. It's super cool to see. So that is now you are the second permissionless network, so anyone can join up with and it's like helium-iot.eu. Is that right?
Yeah, it's console dot helium dash iot dot xyz. That's the chip stack instance, and we still have the legacy console on helium dash iot dot eu. Yeah,
Okay. Write it one more time or say it one more. It's console.helium-iot.
yeah, dot xyz.
XYZ. Okay. Put that in here like that.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Okay, cool. So if you want to check stuff out, you can use the Medeo Scientific or you can use this. They're both run by Paul. So yeah, rock and roll. Check that stuff out.
Very great.
Let's see what else. You had used a 5G, a Helium 5G phone while you're in the US. How was that experience?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, it was really good to have it at first. As I mean, we have roaming. I had a roaming subscription also from my French operator, but was really limited in terms of number of gigabytes I could have. So yeah, I think the Helium one was really good to have an unlimited plan. So it was quite really interesting to have it. It was a good opportunity to test it also, and basically it works really well. What I can say is most of the place where I've been are touristic place, so really far from any big city and so on. So I won't say that I did a lot of CBRS with it. Most of the time I was on a T-Mobile, if I'm not wrong, which is under Helium. And that was, hey, Abe, yeah, nice to see you.
Hey, Paul.
Uh, and so, what has been interesting in experience, I won't say, I mean, I don't have say thing to say about the stuff other than it's working. So that's really good. But what has been really interesting to me is the 4G or 5G experience in the USA is really totally different than the one we get in Europe. Basically, in Europe, we have 100% of territory which is covered. So when you are in a road in middle of nowhere or in between mountains, usually you get a good coverage. And in the USA, it's really, really, really different. Basically, to tell you, we had something like four SIM with my wife. I have two SIM on my phone. My wife has two SIM too on his phone. So basically, we had all the possible operators. So okay, so we can really talk about the global coverage on the highway. Let's just give this example. It's really interesting to me. Is we were on a highway somewhere in the middle of nowhere,
Nevada,
between
come on. Yeah.
yeah, in a desert somewhere, but
Yep.
it's a big way. I think it was between San Francisco and Las Vegas. Okay, so yeah, not a small road basically.
Yep.
Um, and they had a van that was on a top. Basically, there was a big accident, really something. Yeah, I think I don't know. We didn't see the people, but I think they are very hurt by this. And so we taken a look at your smartphone, and there's no coverage. And in fact, we had no coverage since 30 minutes. We didn't have any coverage in the next 30 minutes. Okay, so I don't know how many times I mean, the 911 made it to reach this accident, but it's really long. And so my feeling with that is okay. I understand that the cell operator don't want to make a full coverage on the USA because it's a really big territory, and maybe there's not a lot of money to make on this highway. and other place like touristic place where the coverage was really bad too. But I really think that citizens can improve that. And I don't know for this highway, it's a particular exam, there's also no hours around. So I don't know if we can cover that. But you can imagine that a municipality or secure on highway service or any kind of these things could extend the network with Helium to provide some security service on this. And it also really makes sense in the touristic area where there was quite nothing in terms of coverage.
Yeah.
And where people are living, there is restaurants, there are hotel, and basically yes, the person could provide coverage. And when you are doing a trail like in Grand Canyon or this place, there is really a big risk. That's the same question I had in Yosemite. You are in a mountain, you have no coverage at all. Imagine you had an accident which arrived a lot of time. How you are doing? You are you are crying and people are listening this and crying there to ask someone else and reach the campground where you have things, or you just want to take your phone and call 911.
Yeah.
And so basically, my feeling is okay, service is working, and there is a big opportunity in the USA to add coverage to provide the service around security, or just to let people accessing Facebook when they are in a touristic place. So that's was amazing for me to discover this. My experience in the USA was most in city previously, where the coverage is correct, even if not really good.
Yeah.
What I've seen recently, but what's good experience for this, and it works well. Now my question for Amy for this is okay. I spent a month in the USA. I had this subscription, and thank you so much, Amy, as you helped me to get this. And now, as a foreigner people, what I would like is being able to put this subscription in hold for months and being able to reactivate it for months. I don't care if it's a month or a week, but with the price,
Whenever you come back, yeah.
it can be a month. But when I will be come back and I'm in the USA 1 or 2 times a year, being able to activate the Helium subscription during that time, that would be really, really good.
Bye. What's going on there? Clearly, you can just immediately change it.
I don't know. That's that's a good question for the Nova guys. It is actually kind of an interesting idea of like what is the business incentive for Nova to like maintain an account, right? Like there's a cost to maintaining the SIM card. It's something that I actually found out when I shipped the Foundation eSIM thing. Like basically you need to pay somebody to operate the SIM card permanently, right? And so there's like a monthly cost there. We were eating it for the eSIM thing because it was just a prototype, but like
Yep.
it was it is a good question. Like what is the sort of base cost and where does that money go is kind of an important thing. Like, I think like if that base cost was something like $1 a month, would you pay like $1 a month to maintain a thing? Some bank accounts do this, right? Like if you don't have a specific balance, like they charge you for it, which is completely like I personally think is kind of insane. But like I'm kind of curious where that like an item on a ledger shouldn't cost a lot for
I did
but
that. I did
apparently it
that
does.
by the past. I had an AT&T subscription by the past, and I paid something like I think it was $1 a month for maintaining it.
Mm,
Yeah.
And when I went to the USA, I have to recharge it with a $10 for 10 gigs, something like this. And I did that for
yep.
I think 2 or 3 years. But at the end, my balance has been to zero. I did not get an email to recharge to refill it, and it stopped like this. But yeah, personally, I'm ready to pay $1 or $2 a month to maintain the line. I don't know if everyone will, but I did that by the past.
All right. We'll
Yeah, I
have to
mean,
get a
if that's
go.
the base cost, that seems like reasonable, right? Like I think my parents don't live in the country, and so when they come, they use something like this as well. I actually just put them onto Helium Mobile when they were here recently. So,
I should hope so.
I
Yeah.
mean, that $5 a month seems like worth it to me. Almost like it's almost like a maintenance fee. It's not one, obviously, like, but it's close enough, I guess, and they come often enough that it doesn't matter. I think in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's a pretty audacious price. Let's be clear. Like,
Yeah. Although it's
I
very
can't
different
believe they came out that way.
very different in Europe, and I think Paul was making this point on Twitter. It's like here we're used to, I think my wife and I spend something like $200 a month on our cell phone, just like unlimited. I don't want to fucking deal with going over it. Like that's
Yep.
just what it is. And this thing comes out and it's $5 a month. And in the US, we're like, holy shit, that's crazy. And Paul's like, dude, you
Yeah.
guys are crazy. Everybody gets that here. So,
I mean, it's true, right? Like I think we spend something like 240 a month. We have like four devices, right? Like
yeah,
two phones, two watches, actually five devices. There's an iPad on there too. Yeah, and something like that. It's like unlimited everything,
yeah, yeah.
great coverage, like all that's true. But like it's for but we do this for our home internet too, right? Like or most people do. Like you spend hundreds of dollars for home internet. I'm lucky in that I pay like 30, but like that's because I have a radio on my roof.
Yeah, different stuff. All right, so we got the helium stuff, and maybe we'll see if we can get Amir on here to talk about pricing and mobile and the rest of it. But we got you on here, Abai, to talk about foundation stuff. So some really interesting stuff happened this week. Big shakeup on Monday, ton of layoffs, and it was a lot. It looks like a lot of Lorwyn and Grant people, and then folks from the MCC got cut. It makes me, and I'm probably the rest of the community question, like what does the future look like for foundation? Because the thing that I'm pretty sure of is that both you and Scott and everyone at the foundation is pretty smart people. You're working off of all of the available information that anyone has. I don't think you have the kind of worst interests of helium at heart. You have the best interests. So I'm trying to understand why this happened and where this whole thing's going.
Yeah, and I think there's some responsibilities that we are here for, right? Like ultimately, like we're gonna keep focusing on things that are important. Like number one, like obviously protocol development, right? Like none of this stuff works unless there are smart contracts, they're deployed on chain. There's a significant number of sort of features that are coming down the pipe through governance. Like someone's got to build these things, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like it just doesn't magically appear because a HIP gets written. And so, protocol development, maintenance, like all the Solana program stuff that we use, all needs to be built, right? So we're gonna keep working on that. We hope there will be more folks in the community that'll continue to help, like folks like Root in the community out there, like actually doing the work too. So props to them. But there has to be a center of this, or hopefully multiple centers of this over time. So that's like definitely something. Governance is the other thing. Like the network doesn't evolve unless there is an active community of governance. Like this is everything from the IoT working group, the mobile working group. We haven't launched it yet, but I want us to launch a governance council, like something that's really more like kind of meta, on like how do changes continue to evolve in the community. I think this has always been a question, and no one's really like there hasn't been any like sort of organized effort to try to like really to get us there. And so I think it makes sense for us to just like let's just kick it off. Let's start it off with like an office hours that happens every 2 weeks, and over time, like maybe that turns into a council that's actually voted on by the community. But I think we just need to get started on that one. So governance, part of that's also some engineering work, right? Like I think the governance, like the three of us have been part of the network for a very long time. And so we've seen the different versions of it too. And, we're right now working on some new core primitives on chain that allows us to actually build this stuff the way that's needed for Helium. Like we have realms, it's fine. Like it's actually really good for very like projects that have a single type of stakeholder, but isn't great for, isn't perfect for
Sure.
project like ours where we have multiple stakeholders, right? So like, obviously like we're going to use the thing that's off the shelf, but we're going to iterate on it, right? So that's something that is our job, I think.
Yeah.
And then, governance also applies. Nick, you've been on the MCC since forever. I think that's, and you call that out as one of the things that, we don't have like dedicated folks, or the dedicated folks that are on there, aren't part of the foundation team anymore. Those folks, I think we need to figure out what the future of the MCC looks like. We don't have 100 manufacturers coming in the door right now.
Nope.
Right. We don't have, we do have new kinds of hotspots showing up, right? We have new kinds of light hotspots. We have potentially some Wi-Fi hotspots coming. I don't have all the details about it, but I'm talking to them. I think like ultimately like that needs a process. I think it should be more community driven personally. But if it needs to be some sort of centralized organization, I think it needs to be funded, right? And And like ultimately we've been like doing this on the backs of volunteers, and that's not ideal for a community of this size.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's like also relevant in governance. And then like network awareness education, community management, you know, we need to update the network, and we need to tell the rest of the world what the network is doing. General education, like all the sort of everything that you see on Twitter, any company that's using the Helium network, like how do we highlight them? You know, I think that, you know, ultimately we need to figure out like how do we continue doing that job, because someone has to be that sort of like bell ringer.
Yeah.
Um, right now it's us, and I think and I think it probably should be us for at least as long as it makes sense for the community.
Sure. Let's see. There's a
So like
couple
that's what we're
things.
going to work on, right? Like
Yeah.
that's like what are we working on, and you know, happy to talk about like how we got to it, got to the state that we're in as well.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm curious about so many things. So let's see. I guess the one of the big questions that I hear throughout the circles is like, hey, is Helium Foundation running out of money? And is that what drove this decision? So I guess that's the first big kind of pointed question is like, hey, are you guys right on the precipice? And you're like, holy shit, we're almost out. Or is it more like, hey, this is just driven by a strategic decision to go in a different direction than we've been going in, or something else?
We're not, yeah, to be direct, we're not running out of money. The, you know, balance in the accounts is not zero, by any means, nowhere near that. You know, ultimately, you know, when the Helium Foundation is arguably just a business like any others, right? It's a corporation that has revenue in and expenses out, right? And
Yep.
like if you think about where are the primary costs that any organization have, like you have programs that you're running, you have employees that you need to pay for, you know, maybe partnerships that you need to pay for, or you know, services that you're providing that needs to be paid for. Like those are all like ways that money goes out. Money comes in. There's really only been like the only source of revenue for the foundation. So the foundation is for folks that don't know, the foundation is a US based 501(c)(6). What that means is we're a trade organization, right? And so we're sort of a business league or a trade organization. Like the most famous one of these is the NFL. But we don't have, you know, the revenue that's coming to us from lots of NFL teams.
Yeah.
So it's not like you know, so but that being said, like that's kind of the point of structuring this way. It allows us to actually have members,
Mm-hmm.
and members who pay dues or pay, you know, some kind of membership fee, um, and you know, we can provide you know, features or services for those members. But ultimately, that's the driver of revenue, right? Prior to that, like prior to membership, which we sort of soft launched, and you know, we've been starting to talk to folks in the community about already. Um, Prior to that, it's cash donations, right? And so we've gotten obviously lots of donations from Nova Labs, the sort of founding entity of the network. Um, and you know, there's other folks that have actually given us, so both RAC and Nebra actually have donated to the foundation in the past. You know, obviously like really appreciate that. And you know, I think there was a time, I think, when every rack like hotspot that was sold, and this was a while back, like some small percentage of that went to the foundation, which was like actually kind of a cool thing at the time. uh, I know lots of context around rack
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people might have in the community.
What do you
Or
got,
sorry,
Paul?
rack and sorry, Nebra, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get any income from the token. I mean, you don't get token, which makes sense basically to have token for developing the network.
The the token, like we don't have a token revenue stream. Like actually what's kind of interesting about us versus other foundations is that there isn't like a, you know, permanent grant that the network has given to the foundation, right? To, you know, that's a standard, you know, like here's a token revenue stream that you'll have perpetually. And in fact, if that's something that the community wants to talk about, and if that's like a, you know, hey, like we want accountability on what you guys are doing or transparency on what you guys are doing, and we're willing to put, you know, a revenue stream behind it, I think that's actually a relevant conversation, and we should have it as a community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I fully
Um,
agree. I mean, the in my point of view, the role of Helium Foundation is really to develop the network and basically, I mean, we are paying 30% of the token distributed to Nova, to funder, to stakeholder, and that makes sense that stakeholders that take risk and so on gets token. But in my point of view, we should have a part of it also going to foundation for developing the network. And yeah, because
Yeah, if you're
but
referring to HST, you're talking about HST, Paul?
sorry.
You're talking about HST, like that 30%
Oh
number
yeah,
that you threw out there?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, that's actually a question. In fact, like it's actually in the chat here. Like, do we hold HST? Like, it's a small amount of HST that was donated to us by Nova, right?
Mm,
So it's not like the network gave us HST.
yeah. Mm,
We were given a very, very tiny amount of HST relative to the, other folks in the ecosystem. I think it's like we need to figure out how, what is this? And that's not really a like sustainable revenue path, like
Right.
just over HST.
God, we're getting some questions on membership here. We need to do like a separate membership show
Yeah,
on
we should.
everything.
And in fact, like I'm down for us doing like Scott and Amy are out there talking to potential members, since we soft launched this. I think it is like that's actually kind of, I'd love to do just a talk on that. Like,
Yeah,
like can we do a membership drive on State of the Network? That'd be pretty
totally.
cool.
Yep. Yeah, let's see. So they're requesting on HST Holdings. I got a couple other questions before we get back to that stuff. So let's go back to this MCC thing. So the MCC kind of got gutted as far as folks who had the like institutional knowledge and been there since the beginning. And I think the intent, as far as I've understood it, has always been to get rid of the MCC and to make it basically like an autonomous thing, right? Is that we want
Mm.
it just to be a very straightforward set of rules. And if you break the rules, this happens. And if you don't, that happens. And been a bunch of problems with that. The MCC doesn't have, like really fine instruments to kind of scalpel out problems. It's just like you got a giant hammer and that's it. Is how far away do you think we are from that kind of autonomous decentralization piece where the MCC exists as just a smart contract and not a bunch of people?
That's a really like it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. Ultimately, I actually am, not everyone sort of shares this belief, but I'm kind of a maximalist on this. I actually think the community should be able to kind of hire and fire makers. Um, and we should be able to, like the entire community should be able to hold an individual maker accountable. Now, there's a practical aspect to that is hard, right? Which is like ultimately the makers also need a counterparty that they can sort of have a relationship with. Otherwise, like they can't hold the counterparty, um, you know, uh, accountable either, right? That's like that. So there has to be some give and take there. So like, I think yes, the network and the community should be the one, in my mind, should be the one approving and maybe potentially offboarding makers, but there should be some like teeth behind it, right? Like I don't think this will happen, but like if there was a governance attack, for example, and somebody decided to offboard, um, I don't know, let's pick one that, like let's say like I started a new hotspot manufacturer. I'm not trying to use any of the ones today because I don't want to insinuate anything. But
Yep.
like, I started a hotspot manufacturer and then the network decided and I somehow became the third largest maker and there's, 200,000 hotspots out there that are from Abai's like hotspot shop or whatever. Um, and then the network decided to offboard me. Like now, what is my like kind of like sort of what is my relationship with my customers? The people that bought hotspots from me.
Yep.
Um, there isn't any like economic incentive potentially there for me to continue like supporting them. So I kind of understand that side of it, and so
Yeah.
I do want to like the one thing that I think is important though is that and I've said this privately and I'll say this publicly, which is like a hotspot manufacturer should not be like able to like sort of sell a hotspot and not guarantee onboarding because unless they like said like we are not guaranteeing your onboarding when they sold that to you.
Yep.
Like I don't think any hotspot manufacturer was silly enough to put that into terms of service where it's like no guarantees of onboarding. Like that would be insane. No one would buy this thing.
Yeah.
But like I would be, uh, I think we need to figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And
Because we have this
ultimately, like
problem
I think,
right
yeah,
now.
sure, yeah. And the onboarding server is like is a what was supposed to be a temporary thing as well. Like the same way the MCC was a temporary thing. Ultimately, I think we should spend some time and we as a community maybe us as the foundation specifically should spend the time to build like what is the fully on-chain version of the onboarding server. Essentially, like when I buy a hotspot, I should get a coupon that allows me to onboard that hotspot when I receive it.
Yep. Yep.
Like,
Because we
and it
have,
should all just be on-chain.
because you can look at, I mean, you can do all this stuff is public. You can build a Dune query. There's Dune queries out there to say, hey, how many onboards does a specific manufacturer have left? You can look at this
Yep.
right now. I think I was looking at it 2 days ago. And as an example, the largest hotspot maker so far, 𝗵𝗁, has 0 onboards left. But they have, I don't know if the number of public of how many hotspots are out there that they've sold, but let's say it's more than 0. That puts those customers in a tricky spot, right? As they bought a hotspot and they're kind of at the mercy of 𝗵𝗁 to fund the onboarding. So I think
Yep.
these are great questions and like super good, super important parts for a healthy network in the long term. Let's see, guys, the chat's starting
I
to blow
think
up.
I think
We're
they've
live-
I think they funded it a little bit,
Okay.
but it's still not for what I believe is the totality of like what they've sold.
Yeah.
So like we need to solve that problem.
Yeah.
I've been very direct. The foundation has a certain amount, like a certain role here. The MCC has a certain role here, and the community has also a certain role here. Like all of us need to, kind of agree with that, with that entity that they look, you guys sold some technology or some hardware here that had some expectations that came with it, and we need you to fulfill those expectations.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and
Maybe
yeah,
it's also a bit more like this. The problem in hardware, I mean, what we're doing is that you sell hardware, but you also have to support hardware to update it and so on. The risk we're also facing is the hotspot manufacturer is quitting support. And so, for example, we have a gateway RS update, which is really important in the coming days. And if they don't deploy it, basically it's all this hardware is just coming unusable. So we have ways potentially to deploy your firmware from other brand to the hardware, but we're gonna lost a lot of hotspot and the network gonna crunch on itself. So I think also can imagine some mechanism where a part of manufacturer revenue can be delayed in the future. So basically, by keeping the support, you can get some extra revenue. But if you stop supporting, you don't get this revenue. So I don't know what could be the mechanism. It can be like token distribution or things
yep.
blocked for some time. But there's something to think about this if we want to be long term, in what
We
we're
do,
doing.
yeah, I mean that's probably aligned with what the network, should probably do, which is, give them an incentive and this sounds a little odd, but like give them an incentive to stay engaged,
Yeah.
and they will stay engaged, right? Like, and ultimately, all the network can really do is provide economic incentives to do that, right? Like, and that's either by buying more hardware. That's one way to do it. The other way is to like staking is another option, right? The risk of slashing is another option, right? Like that's they're sort of the stick version of there's the carrot version and the stick version. Um, I think there's a argument to be made where all of these things can work together. And so like, for example, if a maker had to stake a certain amount of IoT in order to be a maker that, continues to be supported network. And, like if that is an amount that could potentially be slashed, like I think that's actually uh, that's actually reasonable, right? And to think about like, yes, there are makers out there who maybe can't afford it. And like early on in the community, there was this like there was this argument. It's like, well, like you're creating a barrier for a new maker to come on board. Um, and I think at the time, the network's opinion was, okay, let's not put that bar up, right? And which is like a reasonable take at the time, right? Like in hindsight bias is what it is. But now, like the sort of side effect of that decision that we made, and which was probably correct at the time. Just to be like not to fault the folks that were thinking about this back then. Like the side effect of that is now we don't have a stick, right? And so we do have this risk.
Yeah, that was always the thing. Was like, hey, we want people in their garage to be able to start a hotspot company. That's awesome, because we've seen so many amazing companies start like that. But if we put a bar of, anything anything significant enough that some big company would feel hurt by it from getting it slashed, that's going to be too big of a bar. So I think the point I'll put on that is that a lot of this stuff has been thought through. Like you said, Abide, and we made the best decision we could at the time, but it's certainly not like the perfect long-term decision that holds forever, which is life. Right?
And you know, like I don't think we should be like to be clear, like perfect should never be the enemy of the good, right? Like we didn't create a perfect network when the network was launched in 2019. If we did, we wouldn't have been launched in 2019. Let's be direct about it.
Yeah. That's always been the
You know,
thing. It's
like
like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like, hey, just do the best you can. The whole plane on fire. Like we'll keep it in the air. You guys put the fire out. Um,
I mean, that's pretty dramatic. Ideally, not on fire.
yeah. Like maybe a small smoking thing. Let's see. We got all these anon questions. Some questions about slashing. Let's do some stuff on the working groups because this is something that I've been kind of hammering on the MCC, which is I don't know if it's technically a working group or not, but it's certainly mostly a volunteer group that has been contributing to Helium for a while, which is what the working groups are. Is do you expect to see a transition from relying solely on volunteer work to starting to put some kind of compensation in for working group members? It seems to me it's not sustainable to rely on people working for free forever.
I think that there's I think definitely like I think there has to be a path towards like sustainability in my mind. Let me say it a different way. Sustainability in my mind is really about like, is there a stream of revenue that the network will provide to enable these kinds of things if the expectation is that someone builds this thing, right? Like, and like ultimately, like if there's a way for, if you want other people to work on something, like as you said, like they probably need a salary, like they need to be paid to do the thing. And like it doesn't come out of thin air, right? Like it has to come from something. And so I think that is I think it'd be great if working groups um, you know had a revenue stream, right? Where they could put and there was some process for, and I think we should be obviously like we should think through like how they get paid, if they get paid, like does that create perverse incentives as well? Like I think that's an important thing that we should consider. But ultimately, like we should acknowledge the fact that like volunteerism works only if there's other economic alignment. Like essentially, if this is the old adage, like if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, right? And so, I think I think we should just acknowledge that is a reality.
Yeah, and that was handled in some reasonable way with the grant program, and both Paul and I have received grants for this, and I think that was like a decent way to start. But certainly in the long term,
Yep.
I'd like to see folks like Paul get compensated for all the incredible
Yep.
contributions he's done for the network, and anyone who's
Yeah,
coming in, spending time.
grants are great and they
Yeah,
work. What is the source of funding for those grants? The source of funding for those grants so far have been the foundation, and the foundation source of funding has been Nova Labs and other cash and token grantors. Like that's just very directly like money has to flow in somehow, and that's where it's coming from. And ultimately, like as an organization, like we have to make like we would like to donate more if there was sort of a path for that. It would be interesting to think about like a community funded grants program as well, where it's less that we are uh, that we're the ones that are like sort of issuing the funds, and it's more that we're doing it on behalf of like community initiatives. A lot of other crypto ecosystem teams do this. There's sort of quadratic funding programs, but ultimately someone has to like give the give the tokens to somebody else or give the USDC to somebody else, right? Like so that's and so this is sort of the more stewardship role that we could end up in as a network.
yeah. I mean, unless you're
Uh,
America, you can't print money, so it's
Also,
got to
it
come
means
somewhere.
that the community, which is mostly part of individual, should also move or extend its perimeter on a more industrial company or on more professional companies. If I mean, you want to have the community able to finance grant or yeah, this kind of stuff. So yeah, I know that this is a role of foundation to discuss with big industrial companies. So don't know what is. Well, it would be interesting to see what is your plan for this, or what is the level of action you have currently in progress in the direction, because it's a key element if we want to have money entering in the community, in the network, basically.
Yeah, I think the, companies that are building on the network are that is like the reason why this all exists, right? Like, we're building a network so that people can use it. These companies that have come to us really, and some of them who we've solicited as well, like those are the ones that will continue to drive the sort of flywheel of the network. And so that is part of our job, right? Like part of our job is to show the value of the network, highlight folks in the ecosystem that are, that I think Heliotics had this awesome video of like they built a collection a collection for trash in a bear infested area. Like that's awesome, right? Like literally building in the bear, which is something that we in crypto seem to love, like talking about. But like it's actually practically useful because of a network like Helium. Right? It's actually possible because of a network like Helium.
Yeah. Let's see. I saw a question in the chat. There's a ton of questions. I think this one is wrong. Who's on the foundation's board? I don't think that is private information, is it? I haven't paid
No,
attention.
it's
No, no.
it's it's me, Armand, and Jamie today,
Okay.
and we're looking to continue to expand.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't think that was private. I thought that was an incorrect question. And then I saw
Yep.
one from Siegfried way back where he was asking, "What do you think the time is until we get to kind of the membership supporting foundation? Do you think we're kind of 6 months out from that? Is that going to take a year, 2 years, 10 years, 5 years? Do you have an estimate at all?"
I think the estimate there, I mean, the reality is, and I'll be just very direct, as we've gone out and solicited membership, we've realized that like we're, not the only entity that's suffering from a bear market here. And so, we can't, I don't think we're going to find, 100, $250,000 donators to the foundation, right? So I think like ultimately, like the we need to recognize that that's the case, and so it's not going to be immediate. And in fact, like I will even say like we're talking to folks about sponsoring Breakpoint, and sorry, the Breakpoint events, right? Like we're trying to run a Helium House at Breakpoint, um, and I'm happy to dive in more on that. But like ultimately, like what we're seeing is like yeah, like we can't necessarily fund um, you know $10,000, $50,000 sponsorships for this event right now because we're trying to also build a business during this time. And so I think that I appreciate and understand these companies who are like, well, we'd love to still be there, right? We'd love to still, and a few of them have even turned around like, oh, and can we get a free ticket? Like, which is like, I get why they want to be there. It's an opportunity for them to sort of uh, um, share their products with a community, right? And then hopefully build a network. And so like ultimately, like I think that is um, that's sort of the situation that we're in. And so we just have to right now, at least, and until we sort of get to a different kind of market, a different kind of macro market, like we'll have to continue to operate with the capital and the assets that we have.
Dig it. Yeah, it's a good time to ask about Helium House. Is that all the ones up till now have been free, and it's like, oh yeah, come on, we'll cover drinks, and yeah, it's like a big party. And this one is like, actually, it's going to be whatever, $300 or $500 a ticket, or $300 a ticket. Um,
Yeah.
it's going to be in Europe, which I think is fantastic. I think it's great to get things out of the U.S. and to acknowledge that the rest of the world does exist. Um, I think that's super cool. But can you kind of talk me through maybe the original size, the size it is now, like what you guys are expecting for Helium House and for attendees of Helium House?
Yeah, I think the plan is still, for us to do a large, European event. We like this idea of co-locating at a breakpoint, mostly because a lot of us will be there anyway. And Amsterdam is a fantastic city for LoRaWAN coverage, and not necessarily because of us. TTN has been there all along. Like and so I think that it's the fact that you can like go anywhere in Amsterdam and have excellent low run coverage on both of these networks, right, is pretty awesome. So I think, if we did this anywhere, it should be in a place with great coverage, or a place that we can spin up great coverage quickly. I think is basically the sort of location type. Um, you know, yes, we are charging for it this year. That's a tough decision, for me personally. I think that, like, I would love to figure out a way to not have to charge attendees. But ultimately, like, if the capital outlay of running a large event with, with lots of great speakers and folks coming in and lots of hardware, there's some folks that have already talked to us about doing hardware drops. So that they're like, oh, well, uh, we we can't really sponsor this thing, but we're willing to come do a hardware drop. Like, that's kind of an interesting alternative to sponsoring. But, like, ultimately, like, we have to pay for an event and pay for all the food and pay for the venue and all that stuff. Like, if there's a $400,000 bill, someone's got to pay for it ultimately. And I'm making up that number.
I was gonna say that seems like a big bill, but I think that's the other thing that's crazy to normal people is that you go to an event and you just don't take into account, like, hey, you've got to pay the server, whatever the minimum wage is, you've got to pay this person, you got to pay that person, you got to pay the rental fee. That shit adds up. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm pretty sure you made that 400,000 number up, if that wasn't that far off from like a standard giant event. Those things are not cheap. Let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah, large events are, and a lot of companies out there use events as actually a revenue driver. To be clear, I don't think the foundation, like, we're not intending to make this a profit center for the foundation this year, at least.
Yeah, just
Like, I'd love to break even on this thing. That's, like, to be clear.
that would be a giant win.
And
Yeah.
um,
Good.
there's a good question out there on live stream. Part of the things that I'm thinking about is actually, like, just live stream it for free. Like, I think, like, but that has a cost, right? Like, there's a cost to, like, the AV folks. Nick, you might actually know this better than I do. Like, what is the cost of live streaming of an all-day event or a two-day event? Um,
Yeah.
it's not cheap.
No, no, shit, no. And you can do it, even if you did it super, on the thinnest of dimes, it's still going to be pretty expensive. Let's see. So one kind of direct question that I've got is, do you see that Helium will move away from LoRaWAN? In this recent layoffs, we lost some of the LoRaWAN folks, and it doesn't seem like there's a huge push towards it. Ultimately, or not ultimately, initially that's what Helium was built on, was LoRaWAN, but it's also been very, the foundation and the group has been very clear, like, hey, this is not the only game in town. Do you see that there's going to be a withdrawal of kind of support of LoRaWAN, or is it something else?
Not even a little bit. Like, I think the realigning people on the team is necessary so that we can focus and we can spend, have the right spend per month. But, like, none of like, I'm still spending all my time on LoRaWAN, arguably, right? Like, sure, I, like, occasionally tweet and or on X or whatever we're calling it now. Like, I send messages
Yeah.
on this platform in the world about, like, Helium Mobile, because I'm a US person and I use it for my personal phone, right? Like, but, LoRaWAN is where we're spending our time. Um, Actually, I would like to think about this more deeply with, like, what is our stream of content that we're putting out there on the at Helium account? Like, is it, you know, like, what is the percentage of LoRaWAN versus cellular, versus other things?
Hmm.
I would, without even looking, I guarantee you it's like 70+% LoRaWAN content, um, maybe more. And I'm certain that that's what we're spending our time on. There's a tremendous amount of work to do on the LoRaWAN ecosystem, right? Like, I think one of the things that we've been talking about is, like, how do we support, uh, so Paul, you kind of mentioned this a little bit. Like, how do we continue to support hotspots that where, makers might um, not be incentivized to continue to support things. I think one idea that we've been talking about, and, I'd love to continue to develop, is this idea of a universal firmware for all the hardware that's out there. Having it being an open sourced a sort of firmware or set of firmware, a set of containers that might be running on your hotspot. And if it becomes somewhat templatized like that, I think it would be easier to support, the mass of hotspots that are online all over the world, regardless of whether or not a hotspot manufacturer comes in and out of the ecosystem. And I think like I'm going to be spending my time on that. I think the other side of it is like, all the data that's coming out of the IoT network. Like there are several consumers, like not just the actual data transfer, but like proof of coverage data. There's ongoing research around this. Like we're going to continue to be look, we're still going to like gather all the Oracle data and provide it to the community, right? Like someone needs to provide that bridge, and we'll still do that. Like we're certainly not done with LoRaWAN or IoT in general. In fact, like we're spending most of our time on it.
Got it. Let's see, 𝗲𝐸. I run a large utility and recently installed several meters, approximately 600, to push out a LoRa signal in combo with a traditional RF signal to test. How can I use the Helium network to grab this data? Hey, funny that you ask. There's actually a Helium grant that funded a thing called the Helium Bridge. This is my grant. I'm being a little bit funny here. And you can take this bridge and take your data. I think right now we got RTL 433. There's a couple other things coming down the pipe, and push it onto Helium. So that's certainly something that Helium supported through the grant program. So you can hit me up on that for sure. Let's see. So good to hear that LoRaWAN's getting support. I know that that's something that, I was like, what originally got me into Helium was this idea of being able to do this for paragliders, funnily enough, and here we are 3 years later, and it's coming up on I think 3 years at the end of this month. Paul, when we were in, let's see, we met up in not Long Beach, somewhere in LA, I forget Santa Monica.
Yeah.
You were talking me through kind of some LoRaWAN business stuff. Can you give us perspective, because I think you've been in it as long as anyone, on what Helium has been able to do LoRaWAN wise with global coverage? Like how does that kind of change the game?
Just to make sure, I'm not sure I capture your question. Is you ask me
Sure.
what the global coverage is going to change in the LoRaWAN area? Yeah. Yeah. Following, to be back on the previous question, which is do Helium can stop doing LoRaWAN? I think the LoRaWAN network is a differentiator for Nova or for Helium or Foundation or whatever. There is some new thing on 5G, but the NVNO concept is not really new. Okay, so there is a lot of competition on this. Wi-Fi is really interesting, but you are basically in competition with 5G, and I'm convinced there is really interesting use case, but and it touch really everyone around us, not totally out of crypto world. So that's really interesting. But you have a big competition with 5G basically on sales operator basically on that domain. What is really interesting is on LoRaWAN, there's no competitors, I would say. As there is local competitor, in France, we have operators, but we don't really know if the telco operator will be durable. We had two, one has stopped, the other one has big contract, so he stays there, but when the contract will be ending, I'm not sure of the interest they have to continue in LoRaWAN, because they are also selling NB-IoT and LTE-M, and okay, it's an extra cost at LoRaWAN for them. So basically here we have something which is unique with Helium. It's a network that is capable to deliver direct service to anyone, but which is also able to deliver service for standard telco operator for really no cost, basically. No investment cost. So that's something that does not exist, that does not have competition, in fact. Okay, because the rest at the worldwide state, the rest is just local, it's just private. So I'm convinced that Nova and Helium won't stop in that direction, because it's really where we can do a lot of business. And also, it's an opportunity to make people going to Helium, going to Web3, basically, because you need this coverage. I can go in detail, but I have some discussion with big companies, for example, that are interesting in to extracting data from everywhere on Earth, and needing a network which is a low-cost network for this. They don't care if it's 100% coverage. They need to extract data sometimes. And Helium is really a good thing for this. And this kind of people will never go to crypto stuff, because it's very frightening the stakeholders, frightening themselves, and so on. But if that's the solution, if it works, if you don't have to manipulate crypto, that starts to be interesting. And basically, it's there, it works, it can work without manipulate crypto when you are a user. So it totally makes sense. And so I think that the point for the future is there on the IoT part, and it makes a difference, but it's a long path. I mean, you have to convince companies to improve their process with
Yeah.
IoT. You have to convince that LoRaWAN is the right solution when you have 100 telco explaining them that only NB-IoT is a solution for everything, even if
Yep.
it's not working, and when it's not working. And then you have to convince them to go on something which is relying on crypto and citizen, basically building the network. So that's a long path and a long step to make it big. But it makes sense at the end. And yeah, that's where the work of the foundation for me is really critical. Is how we put the. I mean, I can speak, I can tell on YouTube or everywhere that it's a good solution, it works well, and so on. But I'm not in the corporate discussing with the digital transformation manager, with the infrastructure manager, with the project manager about what they are looking for, how to solve the issue, and how Helium can do that. And this job of having official representation that can discuss with people in charge in the industry is really important. So Crowd can do a lot of things, but I mean, they want to have a name of someone they can contact this kind
Yeah.
of company. So that's really important. This is going to be really critical to create the adoption. And I mean, after it becomes a commodity. And so once you have, I don't know, 10 or 100 big group that adapt the solution, you don't need all of this. Basically, it's a commodity, you know, that you can get it. It's like getting water. You open your
Yeah.
and you get the water. It's easy like this.
Cool. Super cool. Let's kind of wrap this up with the future of helium. We have like one thing that I think I can cover in fucking 12 seconds is that there is a DC fuck up this week. A bunch of people got freaked out because there was something that was wrong. Looks like Nova's fixed it.
Not the bread, yes.
Yeah. But I think
Well,
that's
I
like
mean,
in a normal week that'd be huge news, but it's not
yeah,
this week.
yeah. I mean, I
We got
think it is a like I don't know, freaked out sort of maybe diminishes like people's credit cards were charged. Like let's
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
direct about it, right? Like
yeah,
so like
for sure.
I don't want to diminish that this is a thing, right? Like this is a problem. Like
Yep.
by there was a bug. It was obviously what it did was, and the direct impact that people had was that they had like if you had like auto
Renewal.
refresh
Yep.
or sort of
Yep.
auto top up
Yep.
on your console account, and if you're on Foundation console or if you're on the dedicated console that Nova runs, you are charged, and that sucks. Like no question, right?
Yep.
And so I think that the fix is already out there. Refunds have already been issued. You know, lots of comms happened yesterday on this. I know Joey was trying to email every single person on Foundation console. Um, there were a few hundred that we think were affected, and for those hundred, like I think he tried to just BCC all of them, which I think broke Gmail apparently.
Yeah, yeah. Gmail doesn't like
Gmail
that.
doesn't
No.
Gmail doesn't like that. So yeah, like we're doing the right thing here, but like it still sucks, right? Like I don't I feel like it's you know like any other you know service that you might have, like you don't want to get charged when you're not expected, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know one of the things that with Helium is that you sort of expect that you know only get charged for your usage, and so what happened to my data credits is a completely reasonable question. So you know all the you know sort of comms have happened, and refunds are happening, and like all that's well and good, but like we should acknowledge that it was a mess up, and it was a technical like error, but
Yeah.
ultimately like it has an impact on people.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I always forget like I live this charmed life, and it seems like when terrible things happen to everyone else, I'm like I somehow managed to skate through. I have no idea why it works. So yeah, it's a good point. Some people got charged 3 grand on their credit card, and that is not something where you can just most people can be like, oh yeah, that's no problem. Like that's a big fucking problem. So yeah,
It creates a stress, right? Like,
yeah,
and that's an
yeah.
unnecessary stress, and so we should acknowledge that that like created stress, even if it was refunded fairly quickly.
Still,
I mean,
yeah,
I've
yeah.
definitely
Good
seen
point.
like credit cards that sometimes like they don't, give you the refund immediately either.
No, no,
Like
it's
that's kind of
a shit show.
yeah. Anyway, yep.
Let's yeah, I probably shouldn't have been as glib about that. Let's see. So next 6 months for Helium Foundation, while we have you on here, what does that kind of look like? What should people expect to see coming out of Foundation? Let's say by Christmas or at the end of the year. Not
I mean,
religious.
I think, the what are the three things that we work on, right? Protocol development, governance, and network awareness. Like those are the three focus areas for us, right? So like on protocol development, we're gonna keep building in the protocol, right? Like we have a laundry list of things that the community wants us to keep building. Like there's improvements in the IoT network. I think that for me, one of the things that I'd like to continue to explore and work on with the community is like how do we number one, how do we you know let's do the tactical stuff. Like Paul, you're hip to like change the witnessing rules. Like I feel like that's the right approach. I really do personally. Let's just get that going. Like there's no reason for that to continue to be the current state it is in right now, in my opinion. So we should just go. The thinking about SLAs and staking, and I think they are actually tied together.
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately, like if we're talking about, and so there's something Paul kind of highlighted, which is like a business needs to know that this is a network that they can trust. When there is typically like there's like a person or a entity that you can call and be like, hey, you broke your SLA. Like, what is the economic and like decentralized version of that? I think it's an SLA that's sort of enforced by the chain, and and enforcement is part of it, right? And enforcement reward kind of goes hand in hand. So I think that that is like why I think that we should enable staking of hotspots or staking of hexes specifically. The reason for that is so that you can actually sort of assert that you are going to provide an SLA for your hotspot, and you're not going to turn it off, and there's an economic incentive for you to stay on, and there's maybe a disincentive if you decide to turn off your hotspot, or you sort of split your coverage, or you have some issues that are local. So I think that those are both like I think like really interesting things for me on the IoT side. The third like maybe longer term thing is I really want to get to a state of um, like further decentralizing the Oracle infrastructure and the Oracle network that we have for IoT. Um, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about and spending a lot of like sort of my engineering cycles on. I don't have a ton of engineering cycles, so I get to only pick the ones that that are important. So yeah, like this is like I think a really really important thing. Thinking about what does that look like on now that we're in the Solana ecosystem? Is it a roll up? Is it data aggregation? Is it on chain compute? Like what is that? Like I think we still need to figure that out because ultimately like there is a carve out for oracles on the IoT network.
Yep.
I would like to get there. I don't think it's going to be solved by the end of the year, by the way. I think the ideas will be there by the end of the year.
You
And
promised
then
me by Christmas.
I think like a few viable ideas should be available for the community to start thinking about and evaluating on like what direction do we want to go.
Cool.
Um, and so that's probably on the IoT side. On the mobile side, obviously like it's cool that Nova launched Helium Mobile. I think we need to start thinking about what a global mobile network looks like, and what are the things that we need to enable that. Personally, I think that eSIMs and Wi-Fi are the way to sort of go global. Alternatively, certificates and Wi-Fi are the way to go global. And I think both are kind of interesting models. And support different devices as well. So I think that like that is something that we should be seeing more of. I know that Nova's working on a Wi-Fi hotspot. I know Wi-Fi Deva has a Wi-Fi hotspot, which potentially could also be used for the mobile network. I think all these things are what we'll see over the next several months, at least to the end of the year. Um,
Cool.
So that's like protocol, like governance. Like I think we should launch the governance council. I think we should start iterating on it. I think you'll see me a lot more. Like back in the old days, I used to be on Discord constantly. I think you'll see me a lot more in the working groups. Right, I've been able to work through some others for a little while, but I think I'm getting back into it now.
Cool.
Network awareness education. We're going to have a European event. And it's going to be fun, and we're going to be doing more events all over the world. So, like, starting to think about what that looks like. So, yeah, lots to work on, even with the team that we have.
Love it. Let's see. So I'm seeing 40-some watchers right now. I got 16 thumbs up. We'll do the usual YouTube stuff at the end. Make sure you hit the thumbs up if you haven't, the like, subscribe, all that crap that helps us bring guests on the show like Paul and Abai. I'm looking forward to having Abai on more often, as well as Scott, so the CEO and COO of Foundation. The other announcement that I've got on the 𝗪𝗁𝐭𝐞 side is that this show will shift over to the Deep in State channel, probably starting next week. 𝗪𝗁𝐭𝐞 will go more for like sensors and kind of purely geeky LoRaWAN stuff, and the Deep in State show will host State of the Network, and we'll probably change the day as well. So it'll look like it'll be Wednesday morning-ish, but I'll sort that out and announce it for anyone who wants to do that. We now have over at 𝗏𝗁𝐿𝐻 a paying client on Friday mornings, and I've been skipping those meetings to get to this, but I can't do that for much longer. So gotta roll with what you got. Fellas, thanks a ton for coming on. Super good to see you on here. Super excited to see what comes next, and have you back on and keep giving us updates on what's going on in Helium.
Thanks again, Nick. This has always been a great venue.
Shit, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Have a good day.